Hey, all you rad dads out there.
I'm super stoked to have you on the show today. I've been listening to you and Keith talk. I probably heard you talk more than I've heard my wife or my kids talk over the last couple of months more. So
I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. So let's stop there, and I'm just going to say, who are you?
Okay. So I'm Greg, and I am a teacher and dad and spouse, and I live in Western New York, right on the Canadian border in a town called Amherst, which is a suburb of the great metropolis known as Buffalo.
Okay.
So I live right by Niagara Falls, right by St. Catharines, Ontario, Niagara Falls, Ontario. So your country, Canada, is right in my backyard, and it's very, very dear to me. So I have been a teacher since 2006. I've taught everything from 8th grade English to 10th grade English to religious studies to philosophy to European history to American history. And I have been a teacher in Mexico, England, New York, Missouri. I did my master's degree at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon.
Right.
So I lived in Saskatoon in Western Canada for a couple of years, which is awesome. And a couple of years ago, I moved here to Buffalo from the middle of Missouri. And for the last 3 years, I have been the host of a podcast called Classical Ideas, which is an academic podcast about the study of religion and culture and the study of the way that religion is everywhere around us, even if we don't pay attention to it. So on that show, I interview, Zen Roshis and, different clergy and practitioners of different religions and scholars and journalists and professors, and fellow teachers who also teach religious studies in a high school, public school setting where it's all academic, not theology based or anything like that. And then this year I started a podcast with my friend Keith called Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi, which is a podcast about Propagandhi, my favorite band. And you are appropriately dressed for this evening.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I put the shirt on just for this.
Woo! Yeah. So anyway, that's been, some of my projects. I also like to run. I like to cycle. I like going to the beach. We have shockingly good beaches here in Buffalo on Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And I went to the beach today with my kid.
Nice.
And I also, I love to travel. I love to cook. I love to read. I love to collect records. I like to play drums. I have a Fender Stratocaster. Yes, I like, doing yard work, the normal stuff. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. I have a million things going on all the time, it seems, but I'm super stoked to be here.
Well, yeah, I'm stoked to have you here too. And I think there's kind of a couple main reasons why I thought it'd be awesome to talk to you today. And so the first one obviously is, because of my love for the band Propagandhi, I've been listening to your podcast and just going down that rabbit hole every week along with you guys, and just been loving it. Ever since Chris's Patreon started, that was so great. I was so excited whenever those episodes dropped. Yours are dropping a little more frequently, so it's meeting a need for sure for me. So it's been a fun ride, and you've had some great guests. It's been just awesome. When you love a band that much, and you can just dig into every word and sort of every aspect, and they're really a band that there's so much to what they're saying, right? It's not just the lyrics and the music. There's a whole backstory to every song. I've learned so much from your podcast. So
so
man, I'm stoked.
It's a real pleasure to do this project, and I am a huge fan of Chris Hanna's Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality podcast and Patreon. I actively encourage everybody to listen and prioritize that show before listening to us. If there's any way you can support Chris's Patreon, I wholeheartedly endorse that you do it. It has been worth every penny
Totally
that I have
agree.
spent as a patron of his show. He's just got such a presence and a way of storytelling that just grips me so much. And so I listen to all of his stuff. I love doing our show too, because I don't feel like if I felt like it was going to be like a hindrance to his project, I don't think that I would do it. But I feel really good about the fact that I can just like say like, everybody should check out Chris's podcast. It's so good. And I've loved talking to guests. I mean, we've been recording guests like nonstop.
Yeah.
And we have so many interviews recorded that we haven't put out yet, because we're like, if somebody agrees to be on the show, we just like say, boom, let's do the interview.
Yep.
So I've got like a massive archive of interviews that we're going to be doling out over the next year as we work our way through the discography of the band. And it's been like crazy. I mean, John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats, Frank Turner, like Rob and Joe from Sacrifice. Like, come on.
I know.
It's been just such a pleasure. And we have so many more in the works.
And it's awesome because I will admit, when I heard that your podcast was coming out, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, interesting timing, right? How's this all going to work with Chris's show? But I totally agree. I mean, I think what you're doing just supplements what he's doing. It provides something that I don't think he's particularly interested in providing, that deep dive into the tiny little details of everything.
Yeah.
I think he's more interested in kind of the bigger picture and telling his story and his experience. And so for me, it's the best thing that's ever happened, because it's just like once a week, I know I have this, hour and a half or 2 hours of just like, I feel like I'm nerding out with my best friends and just like going down that rabbit hole. So I love it.
Dude, and like I totally stole the idea from the As You Were podcast about Alkaline Trio that my friend David Anthony does. And David was on the podcast to talk about When All Your Fears Collide. But David's podcast that he does with Tim Crisp, who also hosts a podcast with Brendan Kelly from the Lawrence Arms, those guys are fantastic. And I was listening to all of their incredible 100+ episodes about Alkaline Trio songs, and I was like, I want to do this so badly. And there was only one candidate, and that was Propagandhi. So like I went in, like scoured the internet to see if somebody was already doing it, and I couldn't find one. And I was like, oh man, we got to do this. So Keith and I were like Twitter pals, and his favorite band is Propagandhi. His favorite record's Failed States. His favorite song is Duplicate Keys of Caro. And I was like, dude, you want to do a Propagandhi podcast with me? And he's like, oh man. I'm like, and he was like totally like overwhelmed by the idea. But I had been podcasting on my other show for so long that I was like, dude, I know what to do. I have this vision, and I want to do it with you. I don't know why I want to do it with you, because we've never met, but like, I just have this feeling that we are going to do an okay job, and we're going to feel good about it. And so we did some test episodes, and we made a plan, and we started booking people, and we just kind of it just kind of worked. So I'm just so grateful that anybody cares at all. And that people are listening to it, because it's just a hobby. It's just something we're doing for fun, and people actually like care about it. And to hear you say that, like, it matters to you, I'm just like, so like, oh my God, it just means so much.
Well, I mean, very selfishly, it saves me, those hours and hours I would spend, at like 11 p.m. or midnight, like just like looking up, like, oh, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
Song? Like, this is great. It's like really spoon fed to me. So on that side of it, I'm really happy.
Well, yeah. And like the reason we have guests is because first and foremost, Keith and I are fans of Propagandhi, and we wanted to have people on the show that are also fans of Propagandhi.
Right.
So like our first guest is a professor at the University of Missouri, Chris Deutsch, and we did a deep dive into Cop Just Out of Frame. Yeah, and like the self-immolation of like the Venerable Thich Quang Duc, and like the history of self-immolations and the context of like the Vietnam War and the protests of what was going on surrounding like Vietnamese Buddhists. And I'm like, just like takes it to
Yeah.
the next level. You get these people on that are so smart, and they tell these incredible stories with all this incredibly vivid and rich detail. And I'm like, we're talking about a song
Yeah.
from a punk band.
Yeah.
And like, this is like, every song is just a wormhole to go down. And like, we couldn't believe that we talked about Bringer of Greater Things for like an hour and 30 minutes. And we were like totally like emotionally drained at the end of it. And I was like, I can't believe how long we just talked about this one song. And it's just really, I mean, it's wild. Like, we can't believe it. We are completely overwhelmed by the scope of the entire thing, and like how much it takes out of us, but how much it gives to us as well.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. Like as a listener, and I swear I'm going to stop like gushing over your podcast here.
I'm overwhelmed.
It's like as a listener, the really cool thing about it too is now every time I go back and listen to those songs, I'm hearing something different. I'm thinking about something different that I never really picked up before, or it was a name or a word or something that I never really understood what the connection was. And you guys have explained that, and it just brings this whole new light to some of these songs that I've loved forever, right?
Yeah, well, and you know what's so crazy is like we're missing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know all the references that Chris talks about in like Winnipeg, for example.
Yeah.
Like the murals on West Broadway, Palmerston and Ruby Street.
Yeah.
And there's all these like little Winnipeg Easter eggs and stuff like that. So people from Winnipeg have started writing to us, like Sam from Witch Police Radio. He's like, this is in Winnipeg and that's in Winnipeg and this is in Winnipeg. So we're hearing all these little snippets from listeners, and people are like, oh my gosh, you guys didn't talk about the cover from the Magnificent Sevens on the Today's Empire Tomorrow's Ashes track. And I'm like, I can't believe we missed that song because it's so good. So like, we're not perfect, and so we get going and we miss stuff, and then people write to us and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys didn't talk about this, and I'm like, oh, we missed that, but tell me, because that's what it's all about. We're loving the feedback. It's so helpful.
Well, I like that. I like that engagement, right? You even had the call-in line. And that's pretty cool. That's unique. So
whenever I get voicemails, I'll put them in the middle of episodes as like transitions from like the interview back into like the discussion about the song. And it's just cool, man. Like, I just toss them in there whenever they land in the inbox.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. Music brings people together, right? It's always been that way. And now it's just on this huge global scale, right? Where you can find that person who loves a band as much as you do and just like totally nerd out with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So shifting gears a little bit, the second reason, to get back to what I was saying, 15 minutes ago, was the second reason I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to you right now, and I think it's timely for that reason, is because you're a teacher. Yeah. And what a weird time in our existence right now. Everybody around the world is obviously dealing with, the impact of the pandemic. I think, sitting here end of August, thinking about back to school, teachers, you guys are in a tough position right now. So I'm also kind of interested to hear about your perspective on that, and where you are on that. But maybe let's back up a little bit. I'm sure we're going to get there, and bring it back to what the show's all about, being a dad. So you're a dad. So how many children?
I only have one child.
Okay.
I am a dad of a 6 going on 7-year-old daughter.
Okay.
Her birthday is in a week.
Oh, nice. Happy birthday.
So I only have one, but she's going into grade 2.
Okay. And do you mind telling me your name?
Gloria.
Okay. Right.
Like track 1 from Patti Smith Horses LP.
Nice.
Yeah.
So father of 1, 6 going on 7. So you're also dealing with kind of school reentry from a parent standpoint as well. So that's
dude, it's not cool
aspect.
It's the worst.
So what is that looking like for you guys where you are?
So here in Buffalo, not fortunately, that's a terrible way to start. New York State had what was like the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in the spring. In April, this state was, people were dying left and right every single day for weeks. And it was a full state mobilization lockdown here in New York. And I felt really grateful that I lived in this state because people were taking it so seriously, like right off the bat, because the pandemic hit here so hard, so suddenly, that we were kind of like all on our heels all of a sudden.
Right.
So I was teaching eighth grade English at a private school here in town near my house. And we were told the school is locking down for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks came and went, and they're like, we're locking down until May 14th. And then that came and went,
Yeah.
and we locked, and then they called it for the whole year. Andrew Cuomo called it for the whole state, essentially. So since then, my kid has been home every day. We didn't do any socializing, any play dates, anything like that. Swim lessons were canceled. Her yoga studio closed permanently. I take my kid to a kid's yoga studio.
Okay.
And so all of her rich, fulfilling life just ground to a halt literally in a day. And so she started doing like Zoom calls with her friends.
Yeah.
She had these like really clunky online app like classes every day. This mountain of homework that was just basically like Imagine Learning and apps and stuff like that. Google Classroom.
Yeah.
And she hated it, man. But the thing was that she reverted to her true nature like suddenly, because she's a total night owl. So she would stay up until midnight and she would sleep until 11.
Wow.
So
Wow.
like the 6-year-old is like, it's like 10:45 in the morning and she's like passed out cold in her bed still.
God. That sounds pretty amazing. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home who are up at like 6:30 in the morning. So
yeah, my kid is not like that, man. She burns the midnight oil. And so she all of a sudden like flipped overnight. So for the last like 6 months, she's been doing like stuff like that. But she's been able to restart swim lessons. Her teachers wear like a full visor, mask, and stuff like that. She's been able to do backyard yoga. We got her yoga teacher to come to our house for private lessons. So they do backyard social distancing yoga in the backyard.
Nice.
And now her school district is opening on a hybrid model reopening. And what that means is they split the school into 2 groups, 2 cohorts. One cohort will go to school on Mondays and Thursdays. The other cohort will go to school on Tuesdays and Fridays. Everybody's distance learning on Wednesday. So 2 out of 5 school days per week, the kids are physically in the building, and 3 days a week they are at home distance learning. So what that means for me is I shifted, and I'm teaching only online this year. And so I actually am not going back to school right now. I am only teaching online. And so I will be home every day, all the time, teaching my online classes. So this year is looking a little different for me because I'm not actually going to a school at all. Whereas Keith, the co-host of the podcast, is going to school every day and working in his classroom, but he's teaching remote from his classroom to his students, which are all at home.
Wow.
So it's like, and like, I'm watching how this is playing out with the university reopenings across the country right now. And, there's like cases that are popping up all over the country. North Carolina shut down their universities. The University of Missouri just reported like a couple hundred new cases today. And I'm like so skeptical that this is even going to happen. So like my kid's supposed to start school on September 10th. And I'm like, it's never going to happen. Like, I'm just like completely unconvinced that she will attend school for even a single day. So maybe I'm living in denial. But I just think that like all of it will be for naught. Like I'm not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. I've got my daughter, my 4-year-old is starting kindergarten this year. And so same thing. So it's a little bit different here. What we're doing is you have the option of either going in person or online, and you sort of have to make that declaration. So our deadline was last week. You had to make that declaration, and then you can reevaluate that at every quarter of the school year. So you could go into school, out of school, up to 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a bit of a different approach. I mean, our daughter's doing kindergarten, which is half day anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's, she's going to be in class, but this is the thing. It's like, no one really knows what is this
Yep.
actually going to look like, what's going to happen. It's this kind of big experiment.
Yeah.
And, like, I think we almost just have to wait and see, right? There's just no other way to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just this time of such amazing uncertainty.
I know.
When I think back to March, because I went through exactly the same thing as you, like, it was all of a sudden the daycare is closed, and I have a job where I kind of work out in the field, and I was pulled out of the field, and it's like, hey, you're just at home now, and like the whole world just changed, in like the course of a couple weeks. And so it really is amazing to see where we are now, and I guess what we've learned and what we have still to learn, right?
Yeah, like I think about, like, so in December, like I go to the Every Time I Die annual Christmas festival here in Buffalo, and it's like the most amazing weekend, like, of music ever.
Yeah.
And I love going so much. And I think about the fact that, like, I was standing in this like massive crowd of like 4,000 people, like watching people just like mosh their brains out to like Glassjaw and stuff.
Yep.
And I'm like thinking back on that, I'm like, gross.
Yeah.
And like March 12th, I think it was, I went and saw Currents and Silent Planet at a tiny little club here in Buffalo.
Yep.
And it was packed and sold out. And there was a like huge pit in there, and people were drunk and like yelling at each other. And I'm like, oh my God. And like, this is the longest I've gone without seeing a show since February of 1998. Like, I have never gone this long without seeing a show since I was like 14. And so this is like, I just think about the before times and the after times.
I know. It's never going to be the same, right? Like, I can't even imagine what live music is going to look like. I've got tickets for some shows for next year, and it's like, that's not going to happen.
I know, and I'm so upset too. I had tickets for Good Riddance and Homeless Gospel Choir in Toronto in May. I had tickets for Strung Out in like June in Toronto, and like, so all this stuff is just gone. I mean, I had tickets for Rage Against the Machine, Tool, Rancid and Dropkick Murphys, like all kinds of stuff that it's just gone.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. So you've got a 6-year-old going on 7. So
sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm here to nerd out too. It's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about, so when you became a father, like, what did that change for you? How did that change you as a person?
Oh my goodness. Profoundly. Because all of a sudden, I know it's a cliche to say this, but I have to, because you go from being almost completely about yourself.
Yeah.
And then the saying is that, like, all of a sudden you have your heart ripped out and it's now walking around outside your body. So when the child is elsewhere, like, you feel like a part of like your physical body is like, missing something, and it's like elsewhere under somebody else's control while you're at work trying to like make money to pay for the house to live in so that, everybody can have a safe place to live. So like, that was like a huge thing for me, because before that, like, I was a super globe trotting, like weirdo of the family. Like, oh, where's Greg? Oh, he's living in Hawaii. Oh, where's Greg? Like, I don't know. He's living in Mexico. And so like, I was, really doing that for a long time, just living completely selfishly. And I still do to a large degree. I'm trying to be better about that. That's something that I'm personally working on, but it showed me the narcissistic approach to my own way of life, I think, that changed my perspective on like what life can be about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a really common one, right? Like, a lot of people talk about like going from a place of kind of being all about yourself, and often, the word selfish is used, and now you're thinking about somebody else, and that's your new priority. And I think, I'm always careful to kind of like, frame it like, I don't want to make anybody feel like I think if they don't have kids, they're selfish. It's not right. It's not like that. Right. But
I'm also not saying that at all.
Yeah, no, I know you're not. But that is certainly like a thing you kind of realize about yourself, and you know, is a sacrifice that you make as well, right? And so you're kind of talking about that struggle once you become a parent, of trying to figure out, okay, like, yes, you know, my identity is partially with this individual now, or these individuals now, but what about me? Like,
Right.
how do I still be me, right? And so that's a pretty common struggle.
Yeah.
So you're kind of talking about that.
Yeah. And like, you know, a lot of the things I was able to retain. I only have one child, and my spouse and I, my partner and I, we work very in tune with each other to make sure that the other one is able to go do what they need to do. So my partner is a marathon runner and
Wow.
runs constantly. And so she goes and runs, and sometimes she's out running for 4 hours. And so that's a lot of one-on-one time with just me and the kiddo, where, you know, you can do a heck of a lot of puzzles and read a lot of books and go to a lot of parks, and, you know, go to a lot of like public swimming pools, and go on little walks in the woods and find little trails and like search for magical fairies and things like that. While it's just me and the kiddo, you know what I mean? So she goes and does that, and it's a given. Like, she doesn't even have to be like negotiating it with me, because it's just how we are.
Yeah.
And so since I'm like that, like whenever a show comes up, I just know that I can go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I know that it isn't an issue. And, you know, we build that into our lives so that the other one can still be an individual human being with passions and interests. And that's like a major thing. And we both have, like, you know, we have our routines. Like, I cook all the food.
Yeah.
I do all the grocery shopping. You know, I do all the yard work. Like, we have our things that
your
we
jobs
like,
or whatever.
Yeah, we fit it into our niche. You know what I mean? And it's just the way it has to be, because live is just overwhelming in general. And to raise children in that as well is so it's just such a balance.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really interesting things, right? Like, you know, working with a partner to kind of try and figure out what that balance looks like, and to help you, you know, meet your needs as an individual as well, while you're still taking care of your child and bonding with your child and doing all those things that are really important too, right?
Yeah. Well, like, and one more thing is, like, I'm also like, for the first 5 years of my kid's life, we lived in Missouri, and I was a teacher in a public high school. So like, I would go to work at like 7 a.m. and come home at like 4:30. And, you know, all day long I am attending to other people's children who are my students in my class. So I come home after a long day of talking to 15-year-olds whole day, and
sounds exhausting.
Mentally, like, I am like horizontal on the sofa. Like, I have literally nothing else to give. I'm a very performative teacher. So like, I am like, my strategy for classroom management as a teacher is, I have more energy than you. I have more energy than all 30 of you combined. And I'm going to just bash you over the head with my energy, so that there's nothing you can do about it, but like, be engaged in the moment.
Yeah.
So, but I come home and that takes a toll, because, you know, when you come home after 5 days in a row of doing that, and you're just fried, and you just want to watch The Office reruns for the entire evening, and all of a sudden there's like a 2-year-old there, and it's like, oh my God.
Yep. So how do you manage that? How do you, I mean, now it's a little bit different, I guess, but what did that look like up until March 2020?
Well, I mean, it's not always great, you know. I have been guilty of so many of the things that people rip on modern day parents for doing, you know, like iPad, Disney Plus, done it all. Like kid comes over to me, I'm doom scrolling on my phone, like, Dad, play with me. I'm like, oh, in a little bit, give me 5 minutes. And like 5 minutes turns into 45 minutes really easily, and you're still doom scrolling, and you could have done like so much with a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. 45 minutes of doom scrolling.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I'm guilty of all of that. Massive imperfections, periods of being like, and like guilt, like racking guilt. Like, I know I should be doing this, but holy smokes, I'm going to keep scrolling on Washington Post until my brain explodes from like societal depression of like the impending doom of our species. And like, and my kid's like, let's color in this coloring book. And I'm like, doom scroll. And like, that's one of the things where I get really bogged down in. And it's super depressing to think about how many times I've done that. But I think it's also important to just like own it and be like, yep, that was a mistake. So that like maybe next time I'll doom scroll for 30 minutes. And then maybe I'll doom scroll for 15 minutes and then 5 minutes. And then maybe I'll actually tell the truth when I say 5 more minutes. And then maybe I'll actually meet that 5 minutes. So it's incremental change of, just being overwhelmed with the world in general, while also having this like unbelievably pleasant, patient, hilarious, thoughtful, small human walking around who actually wants me to do things with her. So, the guilt is like, it's important because it's going to make me better, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think, everybody screws up, right? Like everybody has those moments, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but like that insight, I think is the most important thing, right? Because we're always going to screw up, like whatever, work or home or whatever, you're always going to screw up. And it's about, I guess, recognizing it, right? Like that, it's the same for me. A lot of what you're talking about, it's the same for me. Those times it's like, Dad, come outside. I want to show you something. I'm just like, yeah, just a minute.
Yeah. Exactly.
Later, I'm like, why did I not just go out there? Like, did I really need to, scroll for 2 more minutes on Instagram? Like, no,
well,
the answer is no.
And for you, like, it's super funny because like, both of us like live in these like northern climates. So like warm outdoor season.
Yeah.
You really got to jump on that, man. Because like in Buffalo, like it'll be like May and flurrying, and like people in the South have been like outside since like they never go in, and like it's like May, and I'm watching it flurry outside, and I'm just like, come on. And then the second that ends, I'm like outside.
Yeah,
I'm like at the beach. I'm like on my bike. I'm like in the like backyard with the kid on the swing set. But man, when you live in these places that you and I live, you gotta really take advantage of those days when it's nice and sunny and hot.
For sure. So I think you've kind of hinted at this, but we're the Rad Dad Show. So if I ask you to define what's a rad dad, what are the traits of a rad dad? How would you answer that question?
For me, it's like I would say it's mostly about art. Does a parent, a dad, expose their child to things about the world that are beautiful and make you think? So my kid and I, we have a lot of vinyl record dance parties here, like literally in this room where I am right now. I've got the turntable and the LPs right over here. And she'll come in and she's like, I want to dance. And I'm like, okay, music time. So then I'll bust on an LP. Usually it's like a synth wave record, like the Midnight or like Gunship or something like that. And then I'll put it on, and it's like got that like super 80s synthy sound with like the sexy alto saxophone solos. And then she'll be like dancing, and then I start dancing too. So but then we just like groove, man. We just hang out and we just like groove and get funky.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really love doing, is exposing her to like sounds, because then like later on I'll hear her across the house like plucking at like a ukulele or like a Loog 3-string kids guitar, and then like humming something, and I'm like, oh yeah, there we go. So that is something that I consider to be super rad. Another thing that I consider to be super rad is like we have a membership to the local art museum here.
Yep.
And my kid is obsessed with those massive Jackson Pollock paintings that are like, the canvas is like 25 feet wide.
Yep.
And it's just like overwhelming to look at. She loves that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
so I take her to the art museum whenever I can, and then I take her home and I give her a little canvas and a stack of paints and like a couple of brushes and some water to rinse her brushes, and I say, here you go, make something. And she just paints these crazy, amazing things. And like, so I try to like expose her to these like little inspiring moments, like the
Yep.
dance party, going to the museum. And then I put something like that in front of her to see how she's able to apply it and make sense of it in her way. And that is kind of what I consider to be my indicator of radness, is like exposing her to beautiful things that make her think, and then giving her the opportunity to create something new that maybe didn't exist before.
Yeah. So it's like, so that's really interesting because you're kind of talking about um, exposing her to new ideas and kind of giving her the tools to be maybe an individual or unique and
Oh, she is too.
yeah. And I think, that to me, that's a very teacher kind of answer, right? And
Yeah.
and that's what, when I look back on the teachers that had a big impact on my life, it's those ones who really encouraged my, individuality and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like making that connection there. Yeah. And I mean, certainly if, we look at even like your other podcast, Classical Ideas, like
Yeah.
understanding sort of the differences in how people perceive the world and the meaning of it all, and sort of maybe giving her some of that exposure as well to those different ways of seeing the world and experiencing the world, whether it's art or news or otherwise, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's just something that, I've often said that, like, to me, the meaning of life is curiosity. Like I always like, it's, here's another cliche for you, but like, I want to be on my deathbed learning something new. That's just kind of how I generally try to live my life.
Yep.
And so I feel like if I can do that for her as well, show her the beauty of exploring from a young age and creating from a young age, that she'll never be bored her whole life.
Right.
There's a saying that one of my friends back in Missouri always used to say, like, boring people say I'm bored. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because like they don't like have this like intrinsic drive to end their own boredom. But like I also like when I realize that I'm bored, and like I actually kind of like lean into it, because like I'm so infrequently bored that like I find those times to be some of the most reflective times.
Yep.
Where it's like, oh wow, I'm like leaning into this boredom right now and thinking about it in a new way, to where it becomes all of a sudden very interesting instead of torture, which is what most people think of boredom as, is torture.
Right.
See it as like a space to come up with a new idea for later.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I like that. I like that way of looking at it. Did you have any fears about becoming a dad?
Oh yeah. I mean, look around. I mean, the world is like, okay, so first of all, let me just caveat this and say that the world's incredible. The people of the world are incredible. The cultures of the world are incredible. The food is amazing. Like the natural world that surrounds us on any given day, from all the different species of plants and animals that surround us, all inspiring, mind-bogglingly incredible. But as we go through each passing year, and it seems like we are ever hell-bent on careening towards catastrophe at every given opportunity, whether it's bombing each other,
Yeah.
or in this country, like racist systems of oppression, incarceration, police violence upon racial minorities in the United States, and like the climate. It's just an ongoing series of overwhelmingly tragic situations
Yeah.
that make me question constantly about the the efficaciousness of bringing new human beings into the world. And I only have one child, So like my partner and I didn't even replace ourselves. We replaced one of us, but not both. And, you know, but yeah, it was a very terrifying thing. Um, and then once they're here, you can't imagine them not being here.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's one of those
Yeah.
things like, and I have friends that are like, I'm never having children because I would not want to subject them to humanity's seeming obsession with ending life and making things worse instead of doing all the things that we know that we could do that would make the world a better place, like almost overnight. You know, getting off like fossil fuels, making sure that every single human being in a nation has access to, affordable, reasonable, excellent healthcare. Making sure that all of our schools and education are, stellar. Making sure that certain neighborhoods are funded in ways that bring them back up to a level which is, creating like a sanitary and safe place for all people to live, instead of places like where there's like toxic soil, because there's like a factory out in the back of the neighborhood, but then there's other people down the road that like live in these massive mansions away from toxins. There's like so many things that just spring to mind here. But so yes, to answer the question in a short way, bringing new life into this world is a terrifying endeavor. And it seems like
it's been 6 years, right? So
yeah.
So how have you managed to reconcile that? Like, I think that's a pretty common, I think that sort of bleak view is quite common, right? Of like, what has this world become? But like, I'm curious, like, is there like a little glimmer of hope that comes out of having a child, or like, what does that look like for you? How do you reconcile that?
Well, like I don't know if I have reconciled it per se, but she's here and she's great and she makes me smile and she loves me and I love her. And so now it's like, well, kid, I'm going to tell you some stuff that is going to be overwhelming in the coming years, that might be scary in the coming years, but I hope that you'll be my partner in crime on this, and maybe in our way, by exposing you to some harsh realities potentially earlier than I ever picked up on them, because I lived in a bubble, growing up, a conservative Catholic bubble. And so, reading Howard Zinn for me for the first time was like horrifying.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, the world actually sucks.
Yeah.
And
I didn't realize this.
I know.
How did I not know this?
I was such a dummy. I lived in such a bubble. And so like, and here's another thing. When I was teaching at my last school, I was teaching a religious studies class for all seniors. And we would do things like read the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and, all these incredible classic works of literature that are ascribed to certain religions. And like the things these students would say to me were so profound, so unbelievably inspiring that like the students in the class could like literally make me cry by asking like the most unbelievable questions, by having the most profound insights, like live in real time in my classroom in front of me, that like, I do have hope that so many young people just are not going to put up with these insane injustices that have managed to perpetuate for generations. And somehow my generation like wasn't able to address these things in a massively effective manner. But like, man, I look at like Gen Z and stuff, and they are going to not stand. They are not going to tolerate things in a way that will perpetuate the cycle of massive haves and haves nots. Like, they are going to be calling people out. And I am so proud that my kid is going to grow up in a generation where it's like, that Propagandhi song, it's like, I'll call you on yours if you call me on mine. Like, that is this generation. So like these young people now just blow my mind. And like my kid's only 6, so she's not quite to that point yet.
Yeah.
But like she's coming up behind it, and she's gonna have those kids as her role models in her high school and stuff. And I'm like, and I'm gonna be on the sidelines, like, yeah. So that's like the kind of people that I wished I was surrounded by. But like, when I was growing up in the punk scene and stuff like that, it was like still super homophobic, and we would like call each other like, like shaming epithets and stuff like that. It was not a super intellectual group of people that I was like going to, like, surrounded by at shows. And so it was way more bro-y. And so now I'm super excited by what I'm seeing with young people today as a teacher and as a dad. Like, I'm just so excited for what's coming up right behind me.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's funny, like you kind of talk about, not being sure if you have hope in this world, but it seems to me like you've kind of like positioned yourself in a place where you're around people who give you that. Like, you're a teacher, and you're talking about how you kind of get that from the kids and your daughter. And so, maybe there is more to that than you give yourself credit for. I don't know.
maybe I'm not as dark as I originally thought I was. Maybe I'm a little more, and like, optimism is like the root of something successful occurring. Like, if you have optimism in an idea and you are so optimistic in it that you see it through and bring something new into the world, that's the only way that new ideas can come in, is if you have that ingrained optimism. And you can be cynical, and you can be upset about the way things are, but unless you have this like kernel of optimism that you water and cultivate and grow, and that it sprouts from hard work and dedication to it, like, that's the only way you're going to make any new ideas. Because otherwise the people that are just going to put their thumbs on everybody are just going to keep those thumbs down real freaking hard, like boot on the human face forever. So that's just something that I have to retain. Otherwise I'll just be horizontal on the sofa and then just fall into a crippling depression and possibly never emerge.
Yeah. I mean, this is the world we live in now, right? And it's interesting because I think the pandemic, and I don't want to like harp on this too much, but I think the pandemic has really been a catalyst for moving a lot of this forward in both good directions for some things and horrible, awful directions for other things, right? And has really exposed some major flaws in North American, I would say North American culture and the world that we've created. So it's it's interesting. It's hard not to be depressed, but I do find like the same thing as you, being around kids. There is something about it, even small kids. Like, I wouldn't consider myself like the most like I don't know, like emotional guy or whatever, but there's something about like walking out into your backyard or at the park or something and seeing like your kid play with another kid, and like that joy, that innocent joy that just I to me just like brings out a side in me that is so easy to forget. I think it's that hope, right?
Dude, I tell you what, man, a few weeks ago, my kid, we let her have like, she's got a couple friends in her like social circle right now that we've like reopened to like summer play dates. And I was sitting in my little porch, like looking out into the backyard with my laptop doing a work project, and that new John K. Samson song was in my headphones, that fantasy baseball song. And I saw my daughter and her friend in the treehouse, like coloring the inside walls of her treehouse with like sidewalk chalk, like Dad, we're doing wallpaper. And they would color literally the entire wall inside the treehouse. And then that John K. Samson song came on, and I cried like a baby. And it was like a gut churning like cry that just came out of me. Like, all of a sudden, like freaking John K. Samson like brought me to my knees with that freaking song. And then I was looking out and watching my kid, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, he has a way about himself, doing that. There's a few songs like that.
Oh my God. And the fascist line in that song, like I was like, oh God, it was like convulsions, like sobbing convulsions when that line came on. And like, I was like seeing my kid out in the yard with her friend, and I was like, oh my God, brought me to my knees.
Yeah. So there, you wonder, is there, is that a biological thing? What is that phenomenon, right? And I think it's so
Yeah.
many things, but it is interesting. So shifting gears a little bit, this is, Rad Dad Show. We have a feature. I don't know if you've heard it on some of the other episodes, but we do something called the Rad Dad, the Bad Dad moment. So, like, tell us about a time, I guess it would be 2 times, one where it was kind of like, super proud, best moment ever as a dad, and another one kind of that bad dad moment, where you kind of like, do the face palm,
Sure.
that guilt. You kind of described a situation earlier like that, where you feel guilty afterwards or whatever. Anything come to mind?
Yeah. Okay. So good. Let's do good first.
Sure.
So lately, so this summer, my kid has really, growing up, like whenever the kids are super small, like if say it's like a mom and a dad in the house,
Yeah.
like that's a different dynamic for the children, right? It's like an onion. Okay.
Right.
A family's like an onion. There's like mom is layer 1 of the onion. Not the mom, which is dad, is layer 2 of the onion.
Yeah.
And then not the mom is everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
So like I always felt for like a lot of years that I was like, just not the mom. Like the other person in the house who was like there and trusted and, tolerated, but not the mom, right?
Right. Yep.
However, in the last like year, my kid has really opened up to me in so many new ways, tremendous ways. Like she wants to go do things like with me, like just me. And like a proud moment that I have is this week. For the last week, my kid and I have gone to the beach every day. And because it's super hot right now, and it's her favorite place. She loves it so much that like even though we've been there every day for like a week, she woke up this morning. I was like, "Hey, you want to go to the beach today? It's super hot." And she goes, "Yep." And like she could go every day.
Yep.
And she knows that summer is going to be over soon. So like whenever I ask her, "Do you want to go to the beach?" she knows that she has these like very limited amount of times left. And if she says yes, I'm going to take her. Yep. Like I'll rearrange the entire day to take her, because I know that she depends on me to give her those experiences. And so that's a thing that I've been like really pleased with. And
nice.
We go out there in like the Great Lakes, and like if it's a windy day, man, those Great Lakes waves are nuts.
Yeah.
And so she's just out there just getting pounded by these waves. And I'm just laughing and she's laughing. And we just hang out in the waves and just get pounded by the waves. And then after about 2 hours of getting pounded by the waves, she'll take a wave straight to the face and then just start crying and say she wants to go home. And so every day it's the same thing. It's like 2 hours of just like being in the waves and having fun. And then the wrong wave hits her in the face and she's ready to go. Right. So like, I know that moment's going to come, and then I know that I get to like save her and be like, oh, and get the towel and dry her off and get her warm and get her like, so those are the things that I'm like super happy with right now, is the fact that like this year she and I have spent so much more time together than in such a more like intimate and like one-on-one way than we really ever have. That's like
one little sort of silver lining kind of during the pandemic. I think a lot of people are pulling out as well, as amongst all the awful things. And of course everyone would, turn it around if they could, but that's a pretty common one, that, families are spending a lot more time together and getting to have some of those experiences that maybe they were just too busy or absorbed in their jobs or whatever to kind of really think about. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that one.
Oh, you're welcome. So should I do the bad one now?
Yeah, let's do the bad dad moment.
All right. So when I was a kid, my dad was what I like to call a rage cleaner. Like
sounds like my mom a little bit.
Yeah. So he would get so mad about things and he would like bottle it up. And then I would know that if I woke up at like 6 a.m. on a Saturday with the vacuum, like I lived in the basement.
Yeah.
If the vacuum was the room above me
Yeah.
at like 6 o'clock in the morning, I knew that the day was not going to be a pleasant day. I knew that I would be in the yard, picking up dog poop, cutting grass,
Yeah.
staining a wooden fence, like anything, right?
Yep.
I knew that it was not going to be an idyllic, pleasant Saturday. So that is something that, like, that is a trait that sort of was passed on to me. Like my house is not tidy. As a family of 3, we have 4 pets. And so our pets, like we have like 2 cats and 2 dogs, and we have like litter boxes.
Yeah.
And like we have like there's just like stuff. Like we have
Yeah.
just like, we don't have a lot of stuff, but all of our stuff is like out. My kid has turned every room into a playroom. So like my bad dad comes out whenever like I come downstairs or something and I just want to sit on the couch and it's covered in stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't have anywhere to sit. And I just start rage cleaning, man. And like I go in the kitchen and I'm like mopping the floor and I'm like mumbling to myself. And like I turn the music up really loud and like Good Riddance, Operation Phoenix, full volume. And, you know, and it's like I start doing all the dishes and then I mop the floor and then I'm like, grrr, and I'm like just rage cleaning. And then I go over and I just start picking stuff up off the floor and I'm just throwing it in the trash can. And then later on, everybody's like, hey, where's that thing? Did you see this XYZ? And I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But I totally threw it away. Yeah. So like, that's something that like that comes out in me every now and then. And, you know, I've thrown away tons of my kids' favorite toys, drawings that she's done, threw them in the trash because they were on the floor. I'm like, you don't care about this stuff? I don't care about it either. You know what I mean? So that's my bad dad. It's a trait that was sort of passed down as like rage cleaning and like holding a massive grudge that like everything looks like crap all the time in the house, instead of being like, we freaking live here. I might as well, you know, oh, well, these toys aren't going to be here forever. Like I'll tolerate it for a few years. And I could just like be way more chill about it, but like it takes over the space and then it eats away at me. Yeah. Then I go into like rage clean, bad dad mode.
But then afterwards, I'm sure, like, because I do a little bit of the same thing. Like, I don't know if it's really rage cleaning, but I definitely, you know, something will set you off and then you're just pissed off. And, you know, you're throwing your kids' drawings away or, whatever it is, right? Yep. The mumbling for sure. That's me mumbling under my breath. Yeah. The Operation Phoenix, that's my anger album too. So, like,
best record. One of my favorites ever.
Ever since high school, that's been the one I go to. I think that's pretty common. So that's funny. Luckily, luckily I think it could be a lot worse than rage cleaning, right? So,
for sure. That's like and another one though is that like I also, whenever I like fall into like a depressive state, like which happens, like I'm like very like this as a person, like I'm like, rah! I'm like, yeah, I'm super stoked, or I'm like totally horizontal on the sofa, don't talk to me, I can't function. Like that happens to me every month, for sure. And so like it's either like I do the rage cleaning thing or it's just like total neglect, because I just like cannot function. So like it's like either the depressive states or like the manic rage cleaning are like my two things. You know, and that to me says a lot about the state of access to, you know, mental health care in the world and things like that as well. Like there's so many things that we can do, because I know a lot of parents struggle with things like that. And, but for a lot of people in the United States, especially, where healthcare is such a commodified product, it's not accessible to everybody, especially mental health. Like we do not care about that in this country whatsoever. So, you know, there's a lot of things that could make a lot of parents' lives in this country better. And I think about that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, no, me too. I think, you know, I mean, we're not going to solve the problem, but that's part of what our kind of goal is too, is to kind of be that support. And I think even just, you know, other dads who will listen to this and hear you talk about that, they'll identify with that, and they'll have that moment that they may not have had before of, oh, someone else is going through exactly what I'm going through. Like it's, and I think especially for dads, but for everybody, like I think, mental health, it's a huge problem even here in Canada, where I think we do have a little bit better access to care and support and resources. But everybody deals with it. And often it's just a matter of knowing that somebody else is going through what you're going through really helps. Right. And
Oh, for sure.
Such a stigmatized thing. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to admit this weakness of, this weakness of yours. So that's an interesting one.
Well, yeah. And then like when you fall into like a depressive state and you're just like either in bed on the sofa, or you're just like, I like close the door to the office and I'm just like sitting here on my computer and I'm just like, doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Depression, doom scrolling. And,
I love that term.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before.
What, doom scrolling?
I'm
oh man.
Steal that.
I say it every day. I'm like, what are you doing? Doom scrolling. And so for me, like, and then when you're in that state and you recognize that you're in it and you can't pull yourself out of it and you realize that you're neglecting your family, and then it just makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, why can't I just like get up right now? Just get up. That's all you got to do. You have to get up and go over there and you have to like, do a puzzle and you just do it, and then
pull yourself out of it, like,
and then you still don't do it.
Yeah.
You're just like in your brain, you're on the sofa laying down and you're like willing yourself, get up, just do it, and you still don't do it. And then you just like, you still keep saying yourself do it, and then you don't, and then the more times you say do it and the more times you don't, just the worse it gets.
No, I for sure. I mean, I think that's a common feeling for sure. And
then I think about when I lived in Saskatoon, how I had therapy provided by the university and by the provincial government, and I was felt great because I had somebody who was helping me through my stuff. And then I moved back to this country and that all went away because I was like 27 and uninsured. So yay, all that stuff is real. All that stuff is really, it's really real. And the differences between the two countries, like, I'm not saying that Canada is some like, utopia or anything, but 5 miles to my west here is Fort Erie, Ontario. And like, I think about the fact when I ride my bike along the shore, the massive policy differences between the two countries. And it's a real thing that we deal with here in this country, that we have a long way to go.
Yeah. It's not something I think we take for granted here.
Well, because it's an obvious thing to do, and it already exists for you. And the thought of it going away, like, why would we ever do that? And down here, we're like, why would we ever do that? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's surreal, man. Having lived there, and like having it come back here and like tell people what it was like for me to live in Canada, and have these different things. And then they tell me that I'm wrong, and that what really happens is whatever they heard Sean Hannity say.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I just told you about my real life, and you're telling me that I'm not telling you the truth, even though I actually lived it, and you're listening to this guy on television that's bloviating about something that he's never personally experienced. I'm telling you my actual story. So it's like my brain just goes nuts talking to some folks down here about what things are like elsewhere, and how we actually have things that we can learn from other places instead of being American exceptionalist dingbats.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of territory here, Greg. I mean, we've gone high, we've gone low. This is great. I want to really thank you for your time. I want you to tell anybody who's out there listening how we can find you online. So
sure.
I know how to find you, but let's tell the listeners how to find you.
Sure. Well, if there was a lot of stuff you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, I would totally come back and do this again.
I'd love to continue the conversation for sure.
Clearly, I love doing this kind of stuff. It brings me to life, essentially. Being able to just hang out and have this social time during this socially distanced year that we're having is a real treat. So thank you for inviting me. It's really helpful. So for me, you can find me a few different places. The Propagandhi Podcast, which most of your listeners, I bet, are familiar with Propagandhi. You've had so many great folks and bands on your show that, including Chris, obviously, from Propagandhi. But you can find us on Instagram at the handle Propagandhi Pod, and also on Twitter at the handle at Propagandhi Pod. If you want to listen, if you are a super nerd and you are into like religions and philosophy and stuff like that, you can find my other podcast on Twitter at classical_ideas. And if you go into like Spotify or iTunes and search the Classical Ideas podcast, that will come up. And there's like 175 episodes of that. So if anybody's like, I want to learn about Sikhism or Rinzai Zen Buddhism, or like very specific topics, definitely write to me and I will like custom curate a podcast playlist with certain episode numbers, because going to somebody's podcast about religion and sorting through 175 episodes is completely unwieldy. So if you're like, I want to learn about Rinzai Zen Buddhism, shoot me a message and I'll be like, all right, listen to episode number 48, listen to episode number 80, listen to episode number 108. And like, I'll tell you the exact numbers. Cause awesome. That is like my mega super nerdy academic, like love letter to the world is Classical Ideas Podcast. And you can email us at propagandhipod@gmail.com if you want to shoot me an email. I check that email every day. And you can also tell me some thoughts about the show if you are listening to that show at all. So that's kind of where to find me, and I'm very responsive. Like, I'm like perpetually extremely online, probably doom scrolling, so send me something fun to bust me out of my
break you out of the cycle,
break the doom scroll, and give me something positive to focus on, because honestly I'm probably doom scrolling in a way to find information about a nugget in a Propagandhi song, which there are so many amazing things I have to research for that. But shoot me a message. Happy to hear from anybody. And if anybody wants to talk about anything that we talked about in this episode, you can email me as well, and that'll be fun.
Nice. So I have to say, so I'm like about this close to being done the Today's Empires episode, which is amazing. Yeah. Like,
that was a fun one, man.
So it's funny you said at the beginning, like, I'm really sorry in advance. This is 2 hours long. I'm sorry, guys. Now it's just like 2 hours. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But great interviews on that song. Like just about everybody you've had on the show, like amazing album, a life-changing album for me, for sure.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm loving it. So far I can't get enough of your show. So any little teasers or or things that you could leave us with that might be coming up to pay attention?
Yeah, sure. So when is this coming out?
Probably within the next couple weeks, I would say.
Sweet. So for folks who have never heard the show, so far we've had an incredible array of guests, but some of our upcoming guests include David Gillis, who played guitar for Propagandhi on supporting cast in Failed States, The Beeve. Yeah. He's coming on the show a couple of times. He's also a teacher in Winnipeg. He teaches grade 5. So The Beeve's coming on the show to talk about some songs. Scott Rudinsky from Pulley is going to come on. Lauren Denizio from Warriors is coming on the show. Oh gosh, who else? Lynn Lee from Bad Cop is coming on the show. Sue Lynn is coming back on the show.
Sweet.
Todd Kowalski will be on the show at some point.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Sami Zayn, the wrestler, is coming on the show. Chris Deutsch, who was our guest on Cop Just Out of Frame, is coming back.
That's great. I love that episode. I think that might have been how we started chatting even. Like, I think I just felt compelled to send you a message like, that episode was amazing.
It was, that is hands down our most popular episode too. That episode has hundreds more downloads than the second place episode.
Wow.
For some reason, that episode has just really resonated and taken off. So Chris will be back, but we've got like professors coming on, like scientists, historians. Like we've got some folks that, aren't going to be like super well known in the music world, but who are experts in their profession,
Nice.
talking about concepts related to propaganda. Like we have an actual biologist coming on to talk about zoochosis, and what that means in the natural world. And so like we're really trying to find people that are appropriate for the moment, while also really leaning into the music world as well to talk about how, this band has inspired them. So we have so many good people coming on. I continue to be completely amazed and grateful whenever we get another person to accept the invitation. And we're just going to keep cranking these bad boys out as fast and as reasonably paced as we possibly can.
Nice. Well, I can't wait to hear what you guys have in store. We always kind of end the show by asking if you've got any advice for, maybe it's, current dads, dads to be. You've probably given lots of advice to Keith already, but
Holy smokes.
What wisdom can you leave us with? You better make it good.
Always seek to show your kid the paths to find beauty.
I like that.
I mean, that's really as simple as it gets. Help them find the things that they find beautiful, expose them to things that are beautiful, give them the opportunity to do things that create beauty, and really help them harness that, because there's so much that's bad and screwed up that they will discover, that they have to find out the things that they find to be beautiful, and they have to kind of hold on to that as much as possible, because when the world gets ugly for them and when they realize the things that are ugly, they can always fall back on the things that originally they found to be beautiful to retain hope, even when they're also grappling with the ugliness.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's the theme of this discussion has been around hope. So thank you so much, Greg. This has been a total pleasure for me. It was great meeting you. As close to in person as we can get during this pandemic, I would say.
Yeah.
Probably in the future, we'll be bumping into each other at maybe some Propagandhi shows or otherwise. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure, Brett. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, we'll chat again soon.